All right, folks, this is Dorian Lee, CEO and founder of B-Ball 101's Elite Player Development and the Saved by the Ball Foundation. And this is No Nets. This is episode 2, and we're going to be talking about that new NCAA ruling that allows players to profit from their likeness and image. So everybody is excited, but do you know what it really means for you and your future college athlete? What it means for you if you are a current college athlete? And I don't know if it means exactly what you think it means. And I want to try to sift through a lot of this today. So this podcast, I wanted to divide into 4 different categories. So they're going to be quick categories. We're going to try to keep this entire podcast under 15 minutes, which is going to be tough. What is the NCAA? Are student athletes employees? The bill itself, the SB 206, and some of the provisions inside of the bill that may be somewhat contradictory. And then what is the solution to the problem? We're going to explore all of that. Now, the NCAA is a nonprofit organization. And if you know anything about a nonprofit organization, it doesn't mean that it can't make a profit. The profit has to be redistributed to further the mission of the entity. So when we go and break down some of the revenues, we can see that on the balance sheet, they send money to different entities, to the institutions, to, legal, to administration. So they account for all the dollars. But I'm going to circle a couple of areas in there where we can say, come on, man, I want to see the books and see if these things are actually necessary, or are they just the guys to run a profit organization? We're also going to talk about the NCAA having almost $26 million in investment income. So think about that. They're taking this money and investing it and making additional money. And the players aren't getting a dime. But that's another story. So the NCAA is designed to regulate college athletics. Now, the NCAA's formation dates back to President Teddy Roosevelt in the early 20th century in his response to the repeated injuries and deaths in college football. Now, a lot of people don't understand that many universities were discontinuing the sport because of the fatalities. One year, I think it was 19 deaths on the field, which is, by today's standards, just unfathomable that kids were actually dying competing at the sport. So 13 universities initially came together. 62 higher education institutions came together later as they formed what was known as the IAAUS, which was the Intercollegiate Athletic Association of the United States, back in 1906. It took its present name, which is the NCAA, in 1910. Walter Byers, who is the longtime president of the NCAA from 1951 to 1988, literally went rogue after that. He went against the NCAA and its practices, even though many of the practices are those that he laid the foundation for.
And it's a disservice to these young people that the management of intercollegiate athletics stays in place, committed to an outmoded code of amateurism drawn, quite frankly, in 1956. And they can count the house, and they can multiply the ticket prices, and they can read the TV contracts. And it doesn't take any great genius to understand that what was real in 1956 can hardly be remembered in the gross commercial climate of intercollegiate athletics today. And I attribute that to the neo-plantation mentality that exists on the campuses of our country and in the conference offices and in the NCAA. That the rewards belong to the overseers and the supervisors.
But Walter Byers talked about the term student athlete, which leads us to, is a student athlete a student, or is the student athlete an employee? Under oath and during a deposition, Walter Byers said that a student athlete was a term created by the legal department of the NCAA to insulate the NCAA from workman's comp claims. That was it. And they put student first, hyphenated, that put the emphasis on that player being a student. But there's an old saying that you are a student first and an athlete second. right? Meaning, if you've been a college athlete, you know you're an athlete first and you're a student second.
Because this ain't about education. It ain't much about winning, and it sure as hell ain't much about basketball. It's about money. Just goddamn money.
Now, we got some distinctions with the term employee versus, say, an independent contractor. But we got to distinguish what an employee is, first of all. Now, it's three different areas that determines whether a person is an employee of a company or an independent contractor. You got behavioral control, financial control, and the type of relationship. So the behavioral control is really important to me because it resonates. If an employer trains and directs work, includes hours of work, what tools or equipment to be used, specific tasks to be performed, and how the work is to be done, the worker is likely an employee. What does that sound like? If the worker can set his or her own hours and works with little or no direction or training, he or she is probably an independent contractor. We already know what a student athlete is. You know, weight room with strength coaches, regimented, got to be there at certain times, can't miss, or it's penalties, punishments for missing. On court practices with coaches. Guys, we got to be there on time. But if you were anything like our coaches, we had mandatory breakfasts to make sure that we were getting our nutrition. So we had to get up. We had mandatory study halls. It was a lot of things that had our time regimented. Did we have a lot of the free time that our fellow regular students had? And I would say, no, not at all. So they have set hours. So we check under behavioral control. Yep, employee. Financial control. This factor includes how the worker is paid, whether the worker may work for others at the same time, and whether the worker can incur a profit or loss. A worker who is paid a salary is restricted from working for others, and who does not participate in a company's profits or losses is probably an employee. So I want you to think about that for a second. You get your scholarship, you get tuition, room and board, and that's really it. You don't participate in any of the profits, right? You can't go and work for another institution at the same time. Now, you can always change jobs, which is transferring, but you're in the same situation when you arrive. So under financial control, check, employee. If the worker is entitled to benefits, this would indicate an employment relationship. Guys, that is huge. That is huge. If you are entitled to benefits, and think about it, I think we all would agree that college athletes are entitled to benefits. If I got hurt, I should be compensated. It should be workman's comp. I should profit from my labor on the field. It's very, very important. Now, that leads us into this SB 206 that was recently passed by Governor Newsom in California on LeBron's show. Now, it's no knock at LeBron. I'm so excited that LeBron chose to put this on because it brought the attention to the rest of the world, many of whom didn't know that this wasn't a true issue or didn't see it from a different perspective. Most people are purists or traditionalists where they feel like, you know what, these kids are getting an education and they should be playing for, they should be in amateur status. No. The amateur status went out of the window when college coaches started making $1, $2, $3, $9.7 million a year like Coach Mike Krzyzewski at Duke. It went out of the window when people were paying for entrance into games. It went out of the door when the NCAA tournament can make $1 billion, $900 million, I'm going to round it up, $1 billion over a 3-week span. It's professional sports, folks. And if you've been to my camps, I tell all of my players, your first professional experience will be as a college athlete. And you need to understand how to navigate. But I want to talk about some folks that kind of paved the way. I hate that we don't give these people enough credit. When we talk about Alvis Waldrop Jr., who was the player at TCU who was paralyzed in the mid-'70s and sued the NCAA for workman's comp. Now, it was denied and he appealed and it was denied again, but it opened the door to call student athletes what they really were, employees. Guys, we can never forget Ed O'Bannon, who led the lawsuit against the NCAA and EA Sports concerning the use of his likeness long after he had finished playing college basketball. That is why y'all are getting checks today from the video games, because of Ed O'Bannon's lawsuit. Ramogi Huma, I have a lot of respect for in what he has done. You know, a former UCLA athlete, he helped unionize the Northwestern players a few years ago, and it was observed by the Chicago branch of the National Labor Board that they were indeed employees. Again, it was appealed and things of that nature, but those were huge steps leading to this. Now, Taylor Branch and Joe Nacero have been on the NCAA's neck for years. Taylor Branch wrote the book NCAA Cartel, and Joe Nacero has done many columns about players not getting their fair share of the profits. I also have to say that Taylor Branch was very instrumental in the documentary Schooled, which I force all of my players during camp to watch. And this is what kind of opened their eyes to the process. But it was simply to prepare them for what was to come and how to take advantage of it. So let's talk about that SB 206, because quite frankly, the NCAA will probably follow that model to a T. The programs have to make at least $10 million, the athletic departments, in revenue. All right, that's one distinguishing factor. The three takeaways, the most important, I'm trying to summarize it. You want to prevent post-secondary educational institutions, except community colleges, and every athletic association, conference, or other group or organization with authority over intercollegiate athletics from providing a prospective intercollegiate student athlete with compensation for the use of the athlete's name, image, or likeness. So you can't pay players to come to your school, in other words. You also can't pay players directly. That's another topic. The provision requires professional representation obtained by the students to be from persons licensed by the state. So if you have an agent, it has to be licensed within the state in which you are playing. It also prohibits the revocation of a student scholarship as a result of earning compensation or obtaining legal representation, that agent we talked about, as authorized under these provisions. But there are other provisions that I want you to pay close attention to. All right. So we get excited about that. Okay. We can earn money. All right. Section 2E. E1. A student athlete shall not enter into a contract providing compensation to an athlete for use of the athlete's name, image, or likeness if a provision of that contract is in conflict with the provision of the athlete's team's contract. So in other words, guys, if I can't sign with Under Armour if I'm on a Nike team, I mean, that's an important issue, because teams could get around this. Universities could get around this. The NCAA could encourage them to sew up as many endorsement deals in particular categories. Ridiculous endorsement deals, sunglasses. All right, we talk about our normal beverage endorsements, Gatorade, so whatever the case may be. You know, your shoe and apparel deals. That would sew up many different categories, even headphones, right, where players could not seek those endorsement deals because it would be in conflict with the team's particular contract. So think about that. Number 2, a student athlete who enters into a contract providing compensation to the athlete for use of the athlete's name, image, or likeness shall disclose the contract to the official of an institution to be designated by that institution. An institution asserting a conflict described in paragraph 1 shall disclose to the athlete or the athlete's legal representation the relevant contractual provisions that are in conflict. So they got to bring it to light where's the conflict, and it has to be resolved. A team contract of post-secondary educational institutions' athletic programs shall not prevent a student athlete from using the athlete's name, image, or likeness for a commercial purpose when the athlete is not engaged in official team activities. It is the intent of the legislation that this prohibition shall apply only to contracts entered into, modified, or renewed on or after the enactment of this section. All right, so in other words, money from endorsements, signing memorabilia, autographs. It also could allow you to receive potentially money as youth coaches and things of that nature. But it also goes back to the fact that if you are an employee, the time during season, which covers a large portion of your college year, right? A large portion of that, if you're a sport, it's tough, right? To do other things. So it does limit even your potential to do training like our company, be a player development coach. I'm sure there's many people who will want to be trained by a Duke basketball player. But the question is, what if you aren't a star? See, this is the question we don't like to talk about. We don't like to talk about that this really is going to impact the same 1% of the athletes that were going to be impacted anyway by professional contracts or whatever the case may be. It's not going to impact everybody, because who wants the autograph really to pay for an autograph of somebody who isn't a star or who won't be a future star, where that autograph holds some type of value or weight later on? Who wants that particular autograph, right? Now, for me, there are some solutions, all right? So I'm going to say this, right? We got to get down to the money part of this, because, I've argued with some attorney friends throughout the years that, Dorian, it would collapse the system if you paid the players. But guys, not to offend anybody, I'm going to say this again. I'm only talking about revenue generating sports, which is only two: basketball and football. The majority of the revenue, most institutions aren't even profitable outside of those two departments. So that's what we have to talk about. And we can address the NCAA and some other money being pushed towards supporting all of the other athletic programs like it always has. But in terms of individual player compensation, I want to talk only about the revenue generating sports. All right, so I want y'all to think about this. 337 Division I college basketball programs. So that's 4,381 players. So the scholarships for those players range between about $109 million to $219 million if you take the average cost of tuition in America, $25,000 to $50,000 a year. My proposal has always been pay the players the scholarship and let them go to school really for free. The point that I've always laughed at, and it was laughable to me, is that the players aren't getting paid. They are getting paid. They're getting paid in their scholarship money, but that money goes to the school instead of the player, right? If this is to be a true education, man, the athletic departments are making enough money as a whole, right, to make sure that the university still is able to pay their professors and things of that nature. The classrooms will not increase whatsoever. The size won't increase whatsoever because it's the same students there. They're just not getting the money for those particular scholarship athletes. So if you think about each university, there's only $310,000 worth of scholarships per university on those basketball teams. When you take a look at these ridiculous numbers, I want you to bear with me while I pull these up. This is crazy. These are the top 25 schools that make the most money in college basketball, and this is a Business Insider report, and it also was in USA Today. So I'm going to start at 25, and we don't even have to go up to number one. We're going to talk about the University of Dayton at the time. University of Dayton makes $14 million a year. And the profit on this in 2016 was $12 million. Their expenses were $1.8 million, right? And this is crazy. And in 1 year change, they're up 4%. 5 year change, they were up 30%. So the 3-year average was about $13 million in revenue. If you look at the University of Minnesota, profit, I'm just going to hit profit, $12 million. University of Florida, profit, $12 million. Northwestern, struggled in the Big Ten, whatever we want to call it. $12 million in profit. North Carolina State, $13 million in profit. Guys, basketball players definitely should not have to have that scholarship money go to the university. They should pocket that $25,000 to $50,000 a year, whatever the scholarship is. I think that's more than enough, right? And I think that there should be a deferred compensation plan with the profits to participate in the profits. So now when you're just receiving your scholarship, you're not participating in the profits. But since these universities are investing in real estate and other things, just like the NCAA is investing in other entities, made $26 million in investment revenue this past year. Guys need to be able to participate. But we can put incentives on that. We can make sure that kids get to graduate or have to graduate in order to get that money. So we can also use that money to help them get their master's or to earn a legitimate degree that will allow them to earn a decent living or income. So I want y'all to think about that for a second. That's really something that's important. But these are institutions, the top 25 institutions can take care of that. Now, remember, what about all the other universities? Again, I broke those numbers down, and this is a really easy one, right? $209 million, if it's $900 million made by the NCAA tournament, which represents 82% of all of the NCAA's income, 82% comes from just the NCAA men's basketball tournament. I'm sure that the athletic departments and the NCAA can split the costs, right? The NCAA can subsidize those scholarships. They can subsidize the income that the university would miss. All right, now let's get to this football. The football is a little tougher because there's so many more players, but it's 254 FBS and FCS schools. So the FBS has about 10,965 scholarship athletes. So that's 85 per school. So the scholarship money is anywhere between $274 to $548 million per year, right? A lot of money, guys. That's a ton of money. $540 million in scholarships. All right. Now that includes the FBS and FCS, which is about 7,800 athletes, and they have 63 scholarships per team. But again, when you look at those numbers, like the really staggering numbers, college football's most valuable teams, the top 25 teams, make about $2.5 billion a year in revenue. And they clear more than $1.4 billion of that revenue. So now, when you look at that $548 million in scholarships, it doesn't seem quite as much once you realize that that's just the top 25 programs, right? And that's crazy. Now, the problem with this, for people that say, well, they got expenses, they do have expenses. But do you realize that $239 million on average per year were paid on salaries and severance for football coaches? $239 million of that was severance on those high-dollar football coaches. And only $90 million or so towards student aid for football players, right? So that's crazy, right? The athletic department spent a combined $800 million on capital expenditures and debt services for athletic facilities, add new wings and to recruit more athletes to make more money. Guys, there's something wrong with that. Give the kids a free education. Kids, go to school understanding that your likelihood of playing professional sports is limited. Your likelihood, if you're not a top 1% coming in, right? Can you make it? Absolutely. It's a bunch of those stories, but the odds say you won't, right? Now, I've argued that point a little bit because when you start to, really matriculate all of this down to who really could play at that level, who has the work ethic, the commitment, and all that stuff, the numbers look a little bit better. But from a general discussion, we'll say that it's very, very rare for you to become a professional athlete. And I love the model that the NCAA has used over the years. Most of our athletes will be going professional in something other than their sports. which was really a lead in to maintain this amateur feel, right? To make this feel like it's an amateur, athletic experience when it isn't. It's a professional experience. But I still like that. Give all of the resources that the university can possibly give to a student athlete to make sure that they succeed post-athletic playing career. And it doesn't mean that post-playing athletic career is at the end of their college, run or eligibility. But even put things in place so if they leave the university in good standing, that after their professional careers are over, for those 1, 2 years, it doesn't matter, they can come back and earn their degree, just like the University of North Carolina during their academic fraud scandal allowed for all athletes to do. Everyone who had attended the university and left in good standing since they started athletics could come back and get their degree for free. So I know the money is there. If they can arbitrarily make that decision, they've redirected some funds to do it. So guys, in closing, it is so important that we really pay attention to the bigger picture, right? I want our players to be compensated. They should be able to share in the revenue and the profit. But more importantly, they need the education, like the real education, not the degree, not the paper degree, the fake degree, but that real education of life. Understanding how to network and how to capitalize on this incredible network that is your college experience. There are going to be a bunch of people that you meet along the way who will own major corporations, who will be doing everything in the world of finance and law and business and technology that you need to know. You need to be able to be involved with as many network resources and opportunities and functions and organizations on campus as you possibly can. Many of the degrees in which we earn aren't really worth the paper that they're written on. And I'm not knocking certain degrees. I have a health science degree, could lead into physical therapy, could lead into some other things, but as a standalone, doesn't carry a whole bunch of weight, but it's pretty useful in what I'm doing right now. But in a normal workforce, it wouldn't be as useful. We have communications and interdisciplinary studies and Afrocentric studies and things of that nature, because many of these young athletes don't come from college prep situations where they can come into college and carry heavy workload majors and survive. Not many. Then you have to discount many majors because of labs and the ability to get to many of these classes. It's a direct conflict with that employee work schedule. So I want y'all to truly digest that. They need the educational tools in order to go to the next level. And so I feel that money should go towards education. There should be deferred compensation for our athletes upon completion of degrees that gives them the money to start their life, to buy a home, to invest in a business. But all of the education should be leading up to handling those finances. Guys, that's what is important. And that's no nets for today.